Good morning to all of you, and thank you for coming, especially on the short notice we gave you. The Ministry of Education is appalled at the recent release from the Guyana Teachers Union, both because of its accuracies and inaccurate contents, as well as its breach of agreement made between the parties not to speak publicly while the matter is being conciliated. The conciliation process was initiated by the Ministry of Education in keeping with the grievance procedure, as documented in the 1990 Memorandum of Agreement signed by the Ministry of Education and the Guyana Teachers Union. The ministry sought to initiate the conciliation process due to the impasse in respect of the time frame for the new multi-year agreement, and with the hope that we could resolve the industrial issue that is currently going on in the education sector. The Ministry of Education wishes to make clear the facts surrounding the conciliation process. 1. The conciliation process was initiated by the Ministry of Education in keeping with the grievance procedure as documented in the 1990 Memorandum of Agreement signed by the Ministry of Education and the Guyana Teachers Union. The ministry sought to initiate this conciliation process due to the impasse in respect of the time frame for the new multi-year agreement. That means the Guyana Teachers Union was asking that the new multi-year agreement be based on a 2019 to 2023 period. The government of Guyana is saying it is willing, ready, and able to negotiate based on for the time frame 2024 onwards. So there was an impasse regarding when the multi-year agreement would take effect from. The ministry initiated the process because of its genuine, authentic desire to see a normalcy in the sector and children educated as far as we are able to do that with full classrooms. 2. Both parties attended the meeting on Monday, 13th of May, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. 3. The Chief Labor Officer chaired the meeting and made specific reference to Clause 4 on the Part 4 of the grievance procedure, which states that during the consideration of the matter in dispute under the procedure, operations by the union, nor shall there be any lockout or any form of interference with the ministry's operations by the union, nor shall there be any lockout. Both parties Australia that both parties act in good faith and even imposes a criminal sanction for non-compliance. Number 4, all parties agreed that the issue to be determined is the time frame which should be considered in relation to a multi-year agreement. As such, the contents of any proposed agreement would not be subject for discussion. The parties proceeded to discuss the terms of a resumption agreement. Below is the first draft of these terms. 1. That there shall be an end of the strike by teachers and full resumption of work by all teachers within 72 hours. That was proposed by the union. Proposed again by the union, there shall be no victimization of either party. Proposed again by the union, there shall be no break in service and the status quo ante shall prevail. 4. Following the resumption of work by all teachers, conciliation will commence on the time frame of the proposal submitted by GTU. The parties deliberated and agreed on the following. 1. There shall be an end of the strike by teachers and full resumption of work by all teachers within 48 hours. So they had said 72, we agreed to 48. 2, there shall be no victimization by either party. 3, there shall be no break in service and the status quo ante shall prevail. So you see, the first 3 were agreed to. Still on the table for discussion at that point were the following two. One, following the full resumption of work by all teachers, conciliation will commence on the time frame of the proposal submitted by GTU. And two, that the above terms shall be subject to the determination of proceedings before the court or courts of competent jurisdiction. So we had agreed on 1, 2, and 3, and we had 4 and 5 outstanding. You follow up to now. The meeting of the 13th of May ended, that's Monday, with without resolution to numbers 4 and 5 as stated above. The union said they were tired and they asked that the meeting be adjourned to Tuesday, 14th of May, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. for determination on 4 and 5 above. And we agreed to that adjournment. Both parties were asked to keep the contents of these ongoing meetings confidential, to maintain trust amongst the parties, as well as to show good faith in the conciliation process. The ministry was optimistic that there would be a signed resumption agreement and that conciliation would commence, especially given we had left the meeting with only 2 issues to resolve and we had a way forward on both issues. Number 8, still on facts. On Tuesday, 14th of May, 2024, both parties were in attendance and the CLO, the Chief Labor Officer, reconvened the meeting. Discussions commenced on the options which were put on the table at numbers 4 and 5. Both parties narrowed it down to 2 options, that's number 4. And the ministry was hopeful that the agreement would be signed the said day. After a day and a half of negotiations, suddenly the GTU whipped out a 2-page document and presented that on the 13th of May, Tuesday, 2024, which included a list of demands to be met before the resumption agreement could be signed. The ministry was shocked. Amongst the list of demands were, inter alia, A, that the ministry will make a 20% across-the-board payment immediately before any conciliation agreement or conciliation discussion regarding time frame could commence. B, that the Minister of Labor be requested to recuse himself from the negotiation process. C, that full resumption of duties shall occur and conciliation shall begin only after these conditions were met. The meeting was adjourned with the next meeting date set for Monday, the 20th, 2024 at 1 p.m. So we're still in conciliation. We were supposed to meet next week, Monday. On Wednesday, the 15th of May, 2024, the ministry was appalled to see a release on contents discussed in the meeting in breach of the agreement not to publicly disclose what was happening at the conciliation table. The Chief Labor Officer was explicit on the importance of confidentiality and good faith in these negotiations, and in our view, it was more required than ever given the hostilities that the union brought with its industrial relations. It is now clear, if it weren't before, that there is no interest on the part of the Guyana Teachers Union to engage in conciliation with a view to resolving these issues as is provided for in the grievance procedure in the 1990 Memorandum of Agreement. Nowhere in the world would it be considered normal for negotiations to happen under duress. The GTU's insistence that an across-the-board 20% be paid before any talks can happen is, in fact, duress. Given the GTU's many years as a trade union body and their experience, they must know that this is unusual, unacceptable, unreasonable, and would result in a breakdown of the talks. So it is clear to us that they had no intention to participate in any conciliation or anything to bring about resolution of the issues currently facing the parties. It is clear, then, that teachers' welfare is not the paramount consideration for the Guyana Teachers Union. Teachers are being used as pawns in a much larger, politically directed plot That is destructive and it is sad. The government of Guyana reiterates its commitment to advancing every aspect of the education sector. Teachers are the backbone of this sector and are and will be treated accordingly. To this end, the following have already been implemented in the interest of teachers' welfare. 1. The correction of all teachers' salaries with effect from September 2020 at a cost of more than $700 million. 2. The granting of a $10,000 allowance to all teachers with a university degree. 3. The granting of a $6,000 allowance to all teachers with a postgraduate diploma. 4. The granting of a $20,000 allowance to all teachers with a master's degree. 5. The granting of a $30,000 allowance to all teachers with a doctoral degree. 6. The payment of all graduate teachers at the highest level of their respective scale. 7. Increase in the RAI remote area incentive from $9,000 and $12,000 per month to $20,000 per month for all hinterland teachers. 8. The provision of more than 3,800 scholarships to teachers, which means that more than 30% of our teaching service are on scholarships studying for higher education to qualify themselves, have more integrity and dignity, learn their trade and skill at a higher level, and be able to earn better and get promoted quicker. A request to the University of Guyana by the Ministry of Education to offer all education programs after school hours, which has resulted in us not having a quota for teachers in schools to be able to attend the University of Guyana. There used to be a quota. Now anyone who wishes to be trained at a tertiary level can be trained. The reduction in the number of records kept by teachers, such as the removal of the Child Development Index card, the removal of general schemes of work, the removal of the annual scheme of work, the provision of national schemes of work by the ministry, the weekly preparation of lesson plans rather than daily lesson plans. 11. All trained teachers being eligible to be a senior assistant master or mistress after 6 years rather than 7 years, which allows for an additional $20,000 to be added to their salary and quicker prospects of promotion up the ladder. 12. The appointment of heads of department to primary tops, which allowed for more teachers to be promoted and therefore earn a higher salary. 13. In addition to continued issuance of 50 duty-free per year for teachers, the granting of a duty-free concession to all senior teachers who have 3 years left to serve and have not previously received a concession. 14. All teachers being provided termly with grants to purchase teaching materials at a cost of $3.1 billion for 2024 alone. 15. All CPC pre-service trainees being paid $90,000 rather than $10,000 stipend per month, except if a trainee refuses same. 16. The appointment of all teachers who graduated from CPC in 2023 without signing a contract to serve for 3 years post-training. 17. The Ministry of Education requested the Teaching Service Commission and the School Board Secretariat to do 2 senior promotion cycles per year so more teachers can be promoted and therefore earn higher salaries. 18. A general waiver letter to allow teachers to travel abroad without collateral. 19. The issuance of 1 waiver letter to cover the teacher's contracted period. That is, teachers do not have to get a letter every time they're ready to travel. 20. The holders of the technical teacher certificate as being appointed assistant master or mistress. Better salaries, again, would be the result of that. 21. The creation of more senior vacancies in nursery, primary, and secondary schools so that more teachers can be promoted. For example, 2 deputies to large schools, more senior masters and mistresses. The result again here is that more teachers will earn a higher salary. 22. A reduction in teaching periods for secondary school teachers on a step-by-step basis. 23. No head teacher being required to do any classroom teaching anymore. 24. The assignment of an assistant teacher to senior teachers in primary and nursery schools. 25, the appointment of floating teachers to schools to reduce the workload and substitute for teachers who are absent in a step-by-step basis. 26, the implementation of the MS system, which will Education Management Information System, which will eliminate most aspects of manual record keeping. 27, an open day policy, which is held centrally and regionally to address teachers' concerns. 28, the appointment and upgrade of all teachers who attended the University of Guyana without official release and permission before, during, and after the COVID-19 pandemic. 29, a reduction in the number of teaching practice for CPC teachers from 12 to 6. 30, the training of more than 5,500 teachers by 2025, who will all earn a higher salary on graduation. The institution, 31, the institution of a digitalized senior promotion process. 32, a simplification of the teacher upgrade process after improved qualifications. 33, the substitution of the head teacher's monthly report with a reduced digital version. 34, a waiver for the issuance of the permanent trained teacher's certificate. 35, the placement of guidance and counseling officers in secondary schools to assist with the disruptive behavior of students, thereby giving teachers less work, less responsibility in their daily lives. 36, the continuous placement of data entry clerks in each school to assist with digital record keeping. 37, the introduction of a teacher support unit within the Ministry of Education. 38, the payment for all degree programs completed at UG. Previously, only education programs and a few others attracted the allowances for better qualification. 39, the employment of more than 6,000 new teachers from September 2020 to December 2023. The President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana has made clear and open his intention to treat fairly and equitably with teachers of this country in the shortest time possible. We believe him. We are open for any questions you may have.
Thank you for that, Minister. Now, as protocol, we'll invite questions from the media. You'll state your name and which media house you are from, with 2 questions and then a follow-up.
Minister, good morning. Kurt Campbell from the newsroom. I know you hinted to it. You talked about the request on day 2 being unreasonable, the one regarding the 20% and also the one regarding the minister. But I wanted to know what would be the ministry's official response to those 2 requests, and what does all of this mean for the meeting planned for next Monday, now that they have breached the agreement of confidentiality and they're making what you've said are unreasonable requests.
So, Kurt, look, when you have these kinds of tension between an employer and employee, you have to repair and build back conditions where the parties can get back to a place of a steady head and a steady hand. And if you've checked, go back into the archives on social media or even mainstream media, you'll see that I was very careful with not adding to the chaos and confusion and emotive language and behavior that was coming from the union. I tried very hard to stay mature and to keep a steady hand and a steady head in this, in the interest of the children we are serving. So everybody can't get crazy at the same time. That was my view. And the union was full out crazy. Drums and obia and whatever else they were engaging in. We are now at a place where we initiated a process that was to take us to a room where everybody disrobe and take off all the gimmickry that is usually intended for media and cameras, and we sit down there with steady heads and clean hearts to look after the children of this country. Nowhere in the world would anyone allow a gun to be held to the employer's head before that process could happen. And what we have here is we sit down, we're talking, as far as I understand it, I wasn't in the room, but as far as I understand it, relatively cordially. I mean, you had some exchanges. We were very clear that our position was going to be mature in that room. And so any kind of shade and talk and so on, we just let it bounce off us. And we held that. We held firm to that intention. And a day and a half after conversation started, where you have 4 things on the table, 3 of which were agreed to, 2 more being discussed, the union pulls out a document and says, well, we can't have any of this talking unless you give us 20% across the board to all teachers. Then we will sit with you and decide what time frame we're talking about and what percentage more must be attached to that time frame. Nowhere in the world would that be accepted as decent industrial relations between parties. My position is, given that the union is a union of many years, they're not new. They didn't start 2 years ago. This is a long-standing union who have had some honorable positions in the past. So they know their onions. Given the fact that they know this is not how industrial relations happen, my conclusion could only be that they intended to derail this process. They do not intend to have any conciliation. They want to keep teachers on the road. They want to be disruptive to the education system. And we believe that is being politically directed, because no one who has the interest of children at heart could tell me that this is a good place to be in. After we were sitting at a table in a relatively cordial atmosphere, trying to arrive at a position. So we don't have any doubts that this was intended to derail this process. And then the jump to press this morning to come and make all of that public, even though all the parties, we didn't come and say anything. We could have held a press conference when we got shocked yesterday with this 20% request. We think it's inappropriate, unacceptable, unreasonable. The nation will think so. We could have gotten points from that. We could have gone to press on that. You asked me yesterday at my press conference what was happening, and what did I say to you? I want to leave the process unpolluted. Let them have an authentic conversation that does not get polluted with commentary from outside. I could have told you yesterday about that. We didn't. We are here this morning because we have a duty to the nation to say what really happened, especially when one party breached the confidentiality agreement. And so where do we see Monday happening? At this point, it's very difficult to say. What I can say is the government is not going to sit at a table with these kinds of unreasonable demands and accede to them. It would be very, very bad precedent, not only for the Guyana government, but for governments across the region, if we were to allow this to happen.
Minister, my follow-up question, just to be clear for everyone in this room and everyone listening, what exactly were the compromises the ministry officials, the government officials were willing to accede to accept?
We wanted the teachers to return to work in 24 hours. They wanted 7 to 2. We reached a compromise of 48 hours. We agreed to not discriminating against anyone, not holding anyone's salary, not interfering with anyone's promotion. In other words, that nobody who participated in the strike was going to suffer for that participation. And we agreed to that. Although it is our view that many participated in ways that they could have been consequences negative for them. But we agreed that we weren't going to attach any of those consequences to that. So we agreed to everything else except the one thing we were still talking about is the wording for the time frame. And of course, that everything here is subject to any court decisions that come from a competent court hereafter. So in other words, Kurt, let me tell you frankly where it was at. It was at a place where we were very comfortable that we were about to sign an agreement. And it was just a matter of which words we'll use. Is it an if? Is it a comma? That kind of thing. And we were being very, very reasonable. We were prepared to give a lot. And as soon as the union saw that this was reaching a place where this could happen, they whipped out a document and put it on the table to make sure it can't happen. That's what happened here. That the conciliation cannot begin because they know fully well that to ask for us to pay all teachers 20% on their salaries before we begin talking. Just as an aside, it was not the 20. It was not going to be what they were asking for the 4 years or for the years to come. This is just as a sort of tip, a hold on. They knew that that was unreasonable, so it is very clear that they intended to derail that process.
Minister Svetlana Marshall from News Source. Given the union's most recent demands, the proposals made or conditions laid out, and the ministry's position that those conditions are unreasonable, at least the 20%, the interim 20% payment, if there's no progress with respect to the process of conciliation, would the ministry then ask for the initiation of arbitration? Is there room for that to allow for an early resolution? Because as according to the union, they will continue to strike until some agreement is reached.
Right. These things have processes and procedures, and we've signed an agreement. We have a 1990 memorandum of agreement that tells you how disputes must be resolved. And so we can't conveniently, if that was the intention of the union, Svetlana, that they would break up this whole thing at conciliation and jump to arbitration, then they're not staying true to the agreement they signed, and we insist that we will stay true to the agreement we signed. So we are at an impasse. There's still space for the union to return to the table on Monday, as agreed, and come back to a reasonable place that is in keeping with how these industrial relations usually proceed after a period of a strike. There's still space for that, and I hope that the sane members of that union body could take the union back and bring it to that place so that on Monday we end up with a resolution and a conciliation agreement where we go to the table and engage in the conciliation process. If that breaks down, then there's a place for our arbitration, but it hasn't broken down. This is a derailment of that.
The critic for Daybreak News. Minister, there's a likelihood, and it has to be considered, since you have accepted yourself that there might be a plot here that has a political undertone. With the likelihood of an impasse coming Monday, with the experience that you've had with all the negotiations and where they've been going and how they've been derailed, is the government looking at other options in light of what is clear in the public's eyes and Guyanese in general? Also, what are those? Only yesterday you made reference to the fact that there would normally be one teacher to 30 students, and now is one teacher to 13 students. Is the government looking at the options of restructuring its process? Because not all teachers have an interest in being a part of this. A lot of people are being misled. What are the plans that the government have for the future? And you might not want to disclose them, but are there plans, considerations are being made, or is there a level of naivety here?
So the government has a duty, constitutional, moral, ethical, to educate the nation's children at all costs. And we have been exposed as a world to what a failure to do that because of circumstances during COVID could result in. We have a standing duty to make sure, as far as we can, that we educate all children. A lot of investment is being made in infrastructure, teacher training, provision of resources, provision of food, provision of help to parents to make sure we have a place that allows for children to get easy education. And to access the education we believe they are entitled to. And so we will do what is required to make sure children can access that education. I believe that a lot has been done already that allows for distance education to be delivered. And so we have to step up our game on how we get that out into homes and as parents. But also, nothing will come off the table. We have a standing, sacred almost duty to make sure we look after children. And anyone who wants to, anything that comes in the way of that has to be treated condignly and swiftly with solutions. And so it's not off the table that other solutions are possibly being looked at by the government.
Minister Manichan, I think one of the problems is how you put things over. Because it's put over so eloquently, I think because of you being a lawyer and your background, you try to create an atmosphere. The government is willing to take off their kid gloves at some time. There's an option.
The government is not going to negotiate under duress. The government believes that what it has to do is look after the interests of children. And so we're going to do that. There are many teachers in this country who want to teach our nation's children. We are aware. In fact, that was dealt with. The chief education officer was on the phone this morning, making sure schools where teachers wanted to go back into the schools were open to allow for that to happen, because we have that kind of intimidation happening also in the peers of the teaching service. So we are not unaware of what is happening. Like I said, we understand it is our duty to educate children, and we will do what is required to make sure that happens. There are a whole list of options of things we can do, and they're all on the table being considered.
Minister, you spoke about disruptions yesterday, and the union has released their own figures for how many teachers are participating in this strike. It started last Thursday, street protests over the last 2 days. But what are the assessments of the ministry in this regard, in terms of how many teachers are participating and the level of disruption it has engendered?
I haven't seen the union's figures. What I do know is that hitherto, before in the previous strike, they were releasing figures. They were just calling numbers. The union doesn't have the ability to tell you, and I don't say that with disrespect. I'm just telling you they don't have the reach. They do not have the ability to tell you how many teachers are absent. Our position is that every single teacher absent for even one period of a school's day would cause an adverse effect on the children who were expecting and entitled to that teacher's service. And so I don't want to get into the numbers. I can tell you that almost anything the union says is incredible, not credible, and should be questioned. And that's unfortunate that we're at a place where an institution such as this could bring itself to this place. But we are clear that we do not want a position or to be in a place where children are not engaged by teachers, whether it's 1 or 10 or 1,000. And so that's what we're trying to avoid here.
Yes, Abigail Headley from Starbrick News. I know I would have asked you this yesterday, and you told me that the meeting was currently ongoing. But given how things turned out so far, is the government not willing to compromise on its position to only negotiate salary increases from 2024 onwards?
So, Abigail, that's what we were doing. We were sitting at a table. We have a position. We want to do 2024 onwards. The union has a position. They want to do 2019, 2020 when everybody was home for COVID, 2021 when everybody was home for COVID, 2022, 2023. The fact that we were at a table negotiating that timeline might say there was room for compromise. That's what I thought. We have a very fixed position, 2024 going forward. They have one. We don't want to talk about 2024. We want to talk about 2019 to 2023. We were sitting at a table to see how we could reach that compromise. And when we were at a place of reaching agreement where we could now sit down and start trashing out which years we want to look at, when that looked possible, when that looked likely, when that looked like everybody was going to be able to sign on these dotted lines, is when the union whipped out a document that they clearly had the day before. It's dated the 13th. But they kept it in their back pocket. And as soon as this thing was about to resolve itself, they whipped out something that they must know is unreasonable. That everybody in this room, if I were to ask your opinion, would say is unreasonable when you're at a conciliation table. That the government, the employer, must pay 20% before we can begin this talk. Where else does that happen?
Are there any more questions from the members of the media? If not, that brings us to the end of our... Oh, one more question.
One more question, Minister, and I got this from people who are looking at it live and just sent in a question. Question to the Minister. Is it possible that the perception of oil-rich and what Guyanese should be rightfully getting is influencing the union's decision-making?
Yeah. I don't want to say what is influencing the union's decision-making. I have offered an opinion, mine, that it is now clear to me, and like I said, if you go back to the history of my posture during the strike, you will see that I was very careful with not leveling accusations, with being really trying very hard to hold a steady head with people I know I'll be interacting with over the next forever long, as long as we exist as bodies and institutions. I believe firmly, given these recent events and other telling signs, that this union is being politically directed. I believe that it's very sensational and sexy and attractive to lend the conversation on, well, you're now an oil-rich country. You can do these things. But I ask you to remember, which we have been asking the membership of the union and the teachers to remember, that in this period, like in previous governance periods under the PPPC, what you will see is an equitable distribution of resources. So as we try to build out the hospitals and the schools and pick up bauxite, the industry, and farmers look after farmers, that we look after teachers too. We haven't failed to do things for teachers. I just read to you 40 things that have serious financial implications for the budget of the government, of the country, that benefit teachers individually and collectively. It is easy to run away and say we have an oil economy, but we have to manage it prudently so that we don't end up with runaway recurrent costs where we can't sustain that, and the people of this country, including teachers and their families, become victims of what has been written about, the Dutch disease, when we're talking about the oil economies. The people who are in charge of this particular oil economy right now are people that moved this country from a heavily indebted poor country, from having the highest maternal mortality rate in the Caribbean, from having a low life expectancy rate without oil money into a middle income country, and raised all of those parameters and measurements across the country, sectors across the country. They have shown that they understand how to manage an economy prudently, not give in to the popularist types of policies, to make sure that the country is stable. Why would we not want to pay everybody the highest we could pay them? So we could immediately do what some of the people who don't have the duty and burden of running a country are calling for. Take the oil money and give everybody little bit, or how much ever, divide it up amongst the population. What happens when you have all this money in your hand and you need health services? What happens when you have all this money in your hand and you need to put your child in secondary school at NAPI? What happens when you have all this money in your hands and you put your child in a school, but you have no trained teachers to teach them? How does the farmer produce so that we're still eating and eating nutritiously? So governments have a burden and a duty to make sure their investments are prudent, can be sustained, and enjoyed by all. And it's a heavy burden to bear. But this particular party in government has shown throughout its periods in government, and you can go back and look at that it understands what holding firm to sustainable development looks like, how investments can be made to make sure that is that goal, that we sustain our development, is maintained and reached. And this government is saying to teachers of this country, while we have given all of this, this is not the end. This is the beginning for you. And you will be treated fairly and equitably. And I believe it, because when you look at the history of their behavior, you will see that that is how this political party in government has behaved.
Thank you so much for coming, ladies and gentlemen of the media. This brings us to the end of our press conference.
Thank you all for coming. Anara has copies, so you